Every morning for 12 years, I scrubbed the floors of Halverson Tower before the sun came up. I knew exactly how Frederick Halverson liked his office. Chairs pushed in at a precise angle, blinds tilted to frame the Manhattan skyline, coffee table free of even the faintest fingerprint. The man was obsessed with control, with power, with crafting the illusion of perfection. He never knew I owned 62% of his company. My name is Daniel Reyes, though inside Halverson Global, I was just Danny the janitor. The silent guy with the gray jumpsuit and faded Yankees cap who mopped up spills and changed light bulbs while they whispered billion-dollar secrets over espresso. In 2011, I wasn't wearing gloves. I was wearing a tailored suit. Frederick and I had founded Halverson Global right out of Columbia Business School, two 20-somethings with sky-high ambition. I handled the analytics and systems. He was the smooth talker, the fundraiser. But behind that smile was a snake. When the Eurozone crisis hit and our valuation plunged, Frederick acted fast. Too fast. While I was in Barcelona tending to my father's funeral, he convened an emergency restructuring vote with the board. My absence was no accident. By the time I returned, I was branded unstable and unfit for leadership. Legal documents appeared, supposedly signed by me, ceding key rights. I couldn't prove they were fake, not then. I was erased. No one in the industry would return my calls. My accounts bled dry fighting lawsuits stacked against me. That's when I changed the game. I liquidated my last 3% and created a spider web of LLCs and trusts, each with a different name, address, and story. Through them, I quietly bought Halverson stock whenever the price dipped, which was often, thanks to Frederick's reckless expansion habits. But I needed eyes on the inside. I needed to hear the lies, track the strategy, and feel the pulse of the empire I helped build. So, I applied for a custodial role under a different last name. Frederick never looked twice. Now, as he prepares for the merger that will either make or break his empire, I sit quietly in the hallway outside the boardroom, waiting for my cue. Because this time, the man holding the deciding signature is the janitor he thought he buried. How could he? The eager young strategist he'd betrayed looked nothing like the middle-aged janitor now pushing a mop through the 42nd floor of Halverson Tower. I had gained weight, grown out my beard, and trained myself to hunch my shoulders and avoid eye contact. When Frederick Halverson's eyes drifted past me in the hall, I knew. I was invisible. For 12 years, I studied Halverson Global from the inside. I listened in as executives vented during late nights and after-hours calls. I retrieved discarded documents from recycling bins and pieced together insights most analysts could only dream of. I knew Frederick's strengths, his confidence, his charm, and I knew his flaws even better. He micromanaged relentlessly, alienated talent, and constantly pushed for expansion without regard for financial strain. He was building a glass empire, fragile and stretched thin. And I knew the floor beneath him was already cracking. One night, while emptying trash in the executive boardroom, I found a discarded envelope beneath a chair. It was a draft proposal from Zenith Tech Capital, detailing a potential acquisition of Halverson Global for $4,800,000,000. I read every line with care and smiled. The trap was set. Frederick thought he had outmaneuvered the market. What he didn't know was that Zenith Tech's board had recently added a silent investor, a group of private trusts controlled by me. Over the years, through countless shell companies, I'd slowly built influence within Zenith Tech's leadership. I'd helped nudge their acquisition strategy, funding pitches, and reinforcing the idea that Halverson Global was a ripe target. Every misstep Frederick made only sweetened the deal. Now he strutted through the halls, bragging to junior executives about how his visionary leadership had caught the attention of the tech giants. "This merger will define the next decade," he boomed in the break room one morning. "Halverson Global will finally get the recognition it deserves." I mopped the tile nearby, unseen and unnoticed, just how I liked it. The merger hit the news cycle on a Wednesday. Stock prices shot up. Frederick was hailed as a genius. News anchors dissected his so-called resilience through past market crashes. His face was plastered on magazine covers and business blogs. He was the man of the hour. All that remained now was the final vote, and the signature that would seal his legacy or destroy it. Frederick was certain the vote would be a formality. After all, he believed his allies held enough shares to push the merger through. That's when the trap I'd spent over a decade building finally sprang shut. It began quietly. One of my anonymous holding firms voted against the terms. Then another. Then another. His legal team scrambled to identify the dissenters, but each path led to another shell company, registered under a different name in a different jurisdiction. The trail was endless by design. From the janitor's supply closet, I listened to the panic unfold. Frederick's once pristine office became a battlefield, papers scattered, blinds half open, 3 empty coffee cups sitting on his desk. The man who used to measure power by appearances had started to unravel. Late one night, while vacuuming the boardroom hallway, I heard him yelling into his phone. "How can you not trace them? I need names, damn it. Who's torpedoing this deal?" He paused, then muttered something that confirmed everything I needed to know. "If this merger fails, the creditors will come down hard. We're leveraged to the ceiling." I didn't know I heard him, but I did, and it was the first time I truly heard fear in his voice. That evening, as I emptied his trash one last time, I took a moment to glance at the wall of accolades, magazine features, faux awards, framed headlines. Frederick Halverson, the architect of tomorrow. The irony nearly made me laugh. Because tomorrow, the ghost he buried 12 years ago was coming back to take his seat at the table. I straightened his desk, dusted the window, aligned his awards, then I left, quietly, as always. The next morning, I didn't report to maintenance. Instead, I unlocked a wardrobe I hadn't touched in years. Inside hung a charcoal gray suit, precise, minimal, timeless. I shaved the beard, combed back my hair, stood tall. Daniel Reyes, co-founder and controlling shareholder of Halverson Global, had returned. At 9:45, I entered through the glass front doors of Halverson Tower, the same ones I'd polished for over a decade. The receptionist blinked in confusion. Jim, the security guard, gave me a second glance, recognition flickering in his eyes, but saying nothing. I stepped into the executive elevator, now not as staff, but as the man they never saw coming. As the elevator ascended, I smiled at my reflection in the polished brass panel. It was time. If you followed me this far, you already know, some stories aren't about revenge, but revelation. Subscribe to the channel and join me for the next chapter, where the man they erased finally takes his seat at the table, and everything changes. When I stepped out of the elevator, Frederick's assistant Emily was neatly placing bottled waters at each seat in the boardroom. "Excuse me, sir," she said, kindly but firmly, not recognizing the janitor who had emptied her trash for over a decade. "This meeting is restricted to shareholders and senior executives." I smiled. "I know, I'm one of the largest shareholders." The room filled quickly. Zenith Tech's executive team, Halverson Global's board, legal counsels, and a few select press attendees, all dressed to impress, all assuming this was just ceremonial. Frederick strode in at 9:55, perfectly timed, exuding smug charm. But his steps faltered slightly when he saw me sitting at the head of the table, his seat. His confusion flashed only for a second before he recovered with a rehearsed grin. "I don't believe we've met," he said smoothly, extending his hand. "Frederick Halverson." I stood, meeting his gaze. "Actually, Fred, we have." He froze, and I saw it, the flicker of recognition, the past crashing into the present. "Daniel," he murmured, barely audible. "Hello, Fred, been a while." The room fell into a stunned silence. Frederick's legal team stared at me. The Zenith Tech execs whispered among themselves. What is this?" Frederick asked, voice tight. "What are you doing here?" I pulled a folder from my briefcase and laid it on the table. "I'm here to vote on the merger. Or rather, my firms are. Reyes Capital, Peregrine Holdings, Iron Bridge Ventures." Frederick's face drained of color. "That's not possible. You sold out." You made sure I sold my name," I cut him off, "but not my power. I spent 12 years buying my way back in, carefully, quietly, His legal counsel scrambled through files, eyes darted, fingers clicked on calculators. 62%, I said clearly. That's how much of Halverson Global I now control, which means this merger doesn't happen unless I say so. The Zenith executive finally spoke. Mr. Halverson, what's going on here? I turned to the room. Let me take you back to where Halverson Global began. 2 partners, 1 vision, and 1 betrayal during the 2011 market collapse. For the next 20 minutes, I laid it all bare. Every forged document, every lie, every stolen vote. And I didn't raise my voice once. Because power doesn't need volume, it just needs timing. I laid it all out. The emergency board vote that happened while I was burying my father, the forged signatures, the fabricated accusations meant to smear my name. Then came the testimonies. Former board members, some retired, some bitter, finally admitted their roles in the betrayal. So you see, I concluded, Frederick Halverson isn't the visionary CEO he claims to be. He didn't build this company alone, he stole it, and he's been burning it down ever since. That's a lie. Frederick shot to his feet, his voice sharp with panic. I saved this company. Everything it is today is because of me. I tilted my head. Is that why you're so desperate to push this merger through? Because Halverson Global is thriving? Or is it because the loans you use to fund your aggressive expansions are maturing and the accounts can't cover them? The Zenith Tech delegation began whispering urgently. Their lead counsel stood. We need to pause this proceeding immediately. If Mr. Halverson's authority or the financial records are in question, the merger can proceed, I said smoothly, just not on Frederick's terms, and certainly not with him as CEO. Frederick lunged. The polished, controlled image shattered in an instant. But before he could reach me, 2 security guards restrained him, the same men he once screamed at over spilled coffee and smudged floors. You can't do this, he bellowed. This is my company. No, Fred, I said, steady and cold. It never was. And now? Everyone finally knows it. The next few hours descended into corporate chaos. Zenith's lawyers began poring over financials. Halverson's board, sensing the shift, quietly began disassociating from Frederick. Executives loyal to him suddenly remembered meetings they had to attend elsewhere. By evening, an emergency board vote removed Frederick Halverson as CEO, and Daniel Reyes, was appointed interim CEO of the very company I once mocked. Before I left the conference room, I shared one final truth with the stunned board. For the past 12 years, I've worked in this building as a janitor. I've cleaned your offices, listened to your meetings, and observed everything. I know who's been coasting. I know who's been loyal. And I know how to rebuild what Frederick destroyed. Their silence was deafening. Later that night, with the building nearly empty, I returned to the janitor's closet for one final time. I changed into my old uniform and walked the familiar halls. Not to clean, but to say goodbye to the man no one ever saw coming. The only people who'd ever treated me like an equal stood in the break room, still in their uniforms. Wait, you're really the new CEO? Jose, the night janitor who'd shared 1,000 silent shifts with me, stared in disbelief. I nodded. I am, and my first act as CEO is raising wages for every maintenance and support staff member in this building. This company runs because of you, even if the executives never noticed. I finished my final shift not in the janitor's closet, but in the corner office that now bore my name, the same office I'd polished for 12 years before sunrise. I adjusted the desk to its perfect right angles, not out of obligation to Frederick's preferences, but because some routines just stick. Movement caught my eye. Frederick was in the hallway, flanked by security, a cardboard box in his arms. His designer suit looked rumpled, his expression bitter, stunned. He paused outside my office, eyes scanning the janitor's uniform I still wore. 12 years, he muttered. You cleaned floors for 12 years, just for revenge? I stood tall, finally eye to eye with the man who once erased me. No, Fred. I spent 12 years learning every inch of the company you thought you stole. The cleaning, I smiled. That was honest work, something you never understood. He didn't respond, just turned and walked away. his once confident footsteps fading down the hallway. For the last time. The next morning I came in wearing my tailored charcoal suit. But I made sure every employee knew my door was open. To everyone, from interns to custodians. I'd been invisible once. I wouldn't let anyone else feel that way. Some board members suggested I hire a private cleaning service for my office. I declined. Every morning I still come in early and wipe down my desk myself. Not because I have to, but because it grounds me. Because it reminds me that leadership isn't about corner offices or job titles. It's about respect. Frederick now works across town at a third-rate consulting firm. I hear he tells stories about his CEO days. No one really believes him anymore. And me? I'm exactly where I belong, leading the company I helped build, watching it thrive, this time with heart. And every morning, when I align the edges of my desk just right, I smile. Because sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one you never noticed at all. If you've made it to the end of my story, thank you, not just for watching, but for seeing me. For years, I was the man no one noticed, the one sweeping the floors while people strutted past in $1,000 suits, never knowing I once sat at the same table. I didn't fight my way back just to prove something to Frederick Halverson. I did it because no one should ever be underestimated for the title they hold or the clothes they wear. If this story spoke to you, if you've ever felt invisible, overlooked, or dismissed, leave me a comment below. I want to hear your story. I want to know who you are beneath the surface. Because maybe you're not just a name on a badge or a role on a roster. Maybe you're the heart of something far bigger than they realize. And if this story reminded you of someone, a coworker, a friend, or even yourself, share it. Let them know they're not alone. We're not alone. Most importantly, subscribe to this channel, not because of me, but because of what we're building here, a space where resilience is power and quiet strength wins, a place where stories like mine, and maybe yours, don't go unheard. And remember this, power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it waits, sometimes it watches, and sometimes it's wearing a janitor's uniform, biding its time until the world is finally ready to listen. So, what will your story be? Let's talk about it in the comments. I'm listening, and I'm rooting for you.